Hey, we're just going to give people another couple of minutes, and then we'll kick off at 5 past. Okay, so let's be 14 years. 14 years. Yeah. And then which one was the line? That was 54. 54. Yeah, so it's be 30 meetings. I think I would have learned by now. And hello, yes, good morning to you all. So, did you miss me? No, I'm Brian Nisbet. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Anti-Abuse Working Group, and with us in the room we have Tobias Knecht, co-chair, and unfortunately Marcus de Bruin can't make it to this meeting, which I couldn't do in Berlin, and I missed you all terribly, but I'm very glad to be back here now. So, what exciting things are we doing today? So standard admin, thank you to the NCC Scribe and Chat Monitor, and obviously the awesome technical people from NCC, Meet Echo, and our technical company at the back, without whom I would just be shouting at you all and desperately hoping you could hear me, which is difficult on the internet. Thanks to our awesome Steno people, of course, who are the best. So to remind you all that this working group, both in physical session and the mailing list, is presided over by the right code of conduct. There's a better phrase than that, but it's 9 o'clock in the morning. So please be aware of your interactions with people. You can rate the talks and presentations and discussions that we have here if you so wish via the RIPE85 website. It's not the same as the plenary, but it's useful to get some idea of what people think. So that's all most of the administrivia. The minutes from RIPE84 were circulated. People seem happy with them, on the assumption that people are still happy with them. We will approve them and go on about our business. Seeing nobody rush to the things or ask questions in Meet Echo, we will assume that's all good. The agenda is up online. It was circulated to the mailing list. Is there anything that anyone would like to add at this point in time? The chairs have cunningly added something to the published agenda, but we'll get to that in a moment. So, no. Okay. So, update. Recent list discussion, there hasn't really been a lot of it. There should be more. Talking is nice. No, I mean, I don't think there's anything particular we need to discuss from that we're not talking about elsewhere. But again, if anybody wishes to bring anything up, now is a good moment to do so. And again, seeing nothing, what we're going to do is hope that Gerardo has, got his mic and his camera working, as he found it presumably very difficult to run the quizzes from real life, so has stayed on Meet Echo and is joining us to discuss the update on the RIPE NCC anti-abuse training webinar. Gerardo, are you out there?
I hope so.
Okay, yay, yay, we can see you, cool.
Yes, I cannot see you, unfortunately, but I can imagine the large crowds they're gathering to hear me.
Hundreds, thousands of people.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Gerardo Vivier from the RIPE NCC's Learning and Development Department, and I'm here to give you an update on the anti-abuse training. Let me see if I can share the preloaded slides, if that's possible. Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, we see some slides appearing.
Yeah.
Or at least the promise of some slides appearing.
Well,
your colleague is silently cursing you down the back of the room for not having told him about this beforehand.
Well, they were uploaded to the website.
I have faith in Xavier. It'll be grand. He can hear you, just, you know, FYI.
I have faith in Xavier too. So,
just give it one second, I think. We just want to see them in the room.
Ah, there we go. Yes. Share.
Yay, yes.
Very well. So I'm going to give you an update on the anti-abuse training project that we started on request of the anti-abuse working group. I presented at the previous RIPE meeting explaining what we had done up to then. And so what's happened since RIPE 84 is we started working on the development of the material, and we finished it. We opened it up to the working group for review. I got quite some interesting feedback and useful feedback, and of course some questions as to if the length of the webinar was maybe too short. So we answered those questions as well. And then we organized an online meeting in Zoom where we wanted to get the green light from the working group to say, okay, is this approved? Can we go on and start delivering it? And so we did get the green light, and we are really happy to say that the material, the first version is finished and it's in production. And we're really happy with the results. So I want to thank, first of all, everybody that collaborated and participated in the project during the development and the review phases, because without you, we wouldn't have been able to finish this as we wanted to. So the thing is, what now? Now that we made the material, we're going to schedule it to deliver it regularly. The first session is going to be in January. So if you're interested in knowing what it's about and how it works, you can sign up if you're an LAR or a member. We're going to gather feedback from the participants to see if what we have set as learning goals have been met and what they think about the training. We will evaluate and update the material as we go, because as we learn more about what the learners need in order to be able to achieve the goals, then we will, of course, be updating the material. We also have promised to look into the possibility of developing an e-learning course further down the line when we get more feedback and when we see that the training is having some kind of impact out there. So basically that's it, and I'm open for questions if anybody wants to ask anything.
So, well, I mean, I have a question.
Yes.
It's Brian. Will you come back and keep us updated on that, on the feedback you're getting and things like that as well?
Yes, if that's what the working group requests, we will come back and give you feedback on what has been happening after we've delivered the webinars a couple of times, of course.
Yeah, of course. Nothing huge. Any other questions from folks? And again, we would say this is, I think, Gerardo, we can agree, this is, you know, part of this is aimed certainly at We think it's of interest to everybody, but it's aimed more at smaller LIORs, ones who may not have ginormous abuse desks and things like that, especially starting out and wanting to make friends and make their way on the internet, and be decent netizens. So please, if you know people, if you're talking to them, please spread the word when this goes live in January. So there don't no questions coming in on chat. No. So okay.
My email is there, so if there are any further questions later on, you can always reach me.
No, that is fantastic, and thank you for all the work that you and the team have put into this. We really look forward to seeing how it goes when it goes public.
Thank you, and it was my pleasure.
So cool. If I can get my slides back now, please. Thank you. Wonderful. As you will, so today we do have a number of people that aren't me talking during the working group. However, none of them are physically present in Belgrade. So it will be me and my imaginary friends who will be talking to you. People, 2D people in a screen, but they're all awesome. So one of the things, the other kind of update and piece of work is around the RIPE-DB task force outputs. So one of these recommendations, recommendation number 10, was assigned to the anti-abuse working group. This is around publishing the legal address of resource holders. After weighing the pros and cons and listening to community feedback, the task force decided not to go ahead with this recommendation as there was no clear consensus. But, however, the task force recognizes law enforcement agencies need to access this information in a timely manner to be able to quickly respond to criminal activity on the internet. Therefore, the task force recommendation for legal address is that the community explore alternative solutions. The task force recommends this work be carried out by the relevant working groups. Hi, welcome to the relevant working group. So this is kind of sitting there now going, hi, we should do this. We had hoped, the working group chairs had hoped to have discussed this internally a bit, but one of them ended up in hospital for a while. A lot of life has been happening for the last few months. And we still plan to talk about it, but we would also like input from you lovely people, and maybe some people who might be willing to kind of get involved in that conversation. If you can volunteer now, which would be lovely. You can also send us an email, the chairs, to say you might be interested in helping out. And really, it's just trying to figure out what we can brainstorm initially and see what we think might be suitable there. I do note that the level of interaction with the LEAs and this working group is lower than I would like it to be, and I will be asking the NCC to kind of come back and talk to us a bit more, because they haven't given an update in a while on their LEA interactions, which is something that they used to do at the working group. So I would like to see more of that and kind of get that going again a bit. And this is obviously part of it. So one of the two of you can stand up at the microphone now. I'm done. So cool.
Neil O'Reilly, RIPE Vice Chair. I'm doing the evil thing of perusing my email while sitting in the meeting, and happily I came across something in the database working group mailing list, some contributions from a new person called Frank Breedijk, which seemed to fit on this topic around what kind of addresses we need and what should be the basis for them. His submissions to that list may inform the discussion in this group.
Okay, cool. I will admit I'm a little behind in my reading there, but thank you. So can you just fire us a quick email with that person's name, Neil, just so I don't have to, well, then it's in the minutes and Steno as well, so we don't forget. Please.
Peter Gordinik. Good morning, Brian, and everybody. Nobody's awake, sorry.
A bit. It's all good. Okay. It's all good.
So, I've been a member of that now dissolved task force, and I'll say again what I said at another occasion. Of course, I don't speak for the task force. The task force doesn't exist anymore, and so on and so forth. So I don't claim more weight, but I just voice a moment of caution, because there is or maybe two reasons that there's a plural in relevant working groups, which in this particular case might mean that there are multiple working groups that ought to discuss a particular issue, because in my, from my perspective, it doesn't make sense if we have this stakeholder group thing, so that the needs, desires actually, not needs, of one group are discussed in one working group, and then the people having to deal with it are mostly assembled in another working group. And that's been a theme that we've been confronted with a couple of years now. Just warning against claiming that this or any other working group is the one, right? We need a bit more interaction there.
No,
thank you.
And you're absolutely correct. What I suppose and that, yeah, better explanation is good. We have been asked to, I suppose, lead on this, but not go off on our own and do our own thing. And absolutely, there's a bunch of other people that need to be involved in that. So thank you, Peter, for making that very clear. It's not, we do not wish to do any solo runs, because it's all a very integrated thing. Or turn around to someone and go, hey, we're just going to lob this piece of work over the wall to you, like we've been accused of in the past. So let's not do that again. But yeah, no, absolutely. Please.
Hi, my name is Farzan Abadi. I think that maybe before focusing on LEA and legal address and all sorts of terms that are ambiguous and there's no one definition about it, like, do we know what we are talking about? Like, when we talk about law enforcement agencies, do we actually mean, like, what do we mean by law enforcement agencies? Are they like the only ones based in Europe or in other countries? Because, and then also when we talk about legal address, which jurisdiction are we talking about? And then when we talk about criminal activity, what sort of criminal activity are we talking about? So these are like the things that I think that this recommendation on its own is very ambiguous. And we need to like discuss what we really need to tackle and provide alternative solutions for, especially when I don't know if cooperation with LEAs is even advisable, but maybe they should think about alternative ways themselves as well.
So certainly from the, and I am not going to attempt to answer for the entire RIPE community here. What I can talk about is the experience of interaction with law enforcement over the last 15 years or so. So to answer some of your questions, we're talking about the legally empowered law enforcement agencies in a RIPE, in a state which is in the RIPE service region. Now, the laws of those vary hugely. Obviously 71, 72 countries, there's a huge variance in the legal structures, the culture, everything, you know, there. And it's not an attempt to make a one size fits all. It's also not an attempt, certainly from my point of view, there's no attempt to go, okay, you get super special, you know, access. All of the rules, all of the pieces that Athena and other people have talked about around court orders and the transparency reports that are there are absolutely there. And this is not a one-way street either. Law enforcement absolutely has to engage to work, you know, to work on this as well. And there is, and I know, and I'm not sure where these activities are at the moment, but the NCC used to do, and presumably still does, a bunch of training for how to interrogate the database for law enforcement using exactly the public information that everybody else can access. It's tricksy. You know, there's no two ways about this. But when we talk about that, what we're talking about is the legally defined law enforcement agencies in a member state, but remembering that all of, you know, the legal framework around this is the NCC is a company based in the Netherlands, and that's the, you know, that's the legal framework under which the NCC operate. So I don't know if that answers fully your question, but they're the definitions we're talking about. But it doesn't mean that, you know, that there's no attempt to give out with a court order, which is recognized appropriately in the right jurisdictions, any sort of access that you wouldn't be able to get by logging on to the database as a citizen of wherever. Does that answer any of your questions, or?
Yeah, it does. It's just that, well, when Well, I'm just going to be blunt about this. Some countries in this, in RIPE service region, the law enforcement is actually human rights violators. So I think that we need to think about talking about access and cooperation with law enforcement very carefully and acknowledge this issue. But I get that this has been like the talk of the community for the past 15 years, but it's never too late to bring it up.
Yeah, no, thank you. Peter, did you want to say something? Or
Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Maria Sofilaf, Senior Legal Counsel from the RIPE NCC, and I was also part of the task force. I'm sorry, I will take this out.
yeah, sure.
Just to give a little bit of more context here, this recommendation from the task force was a follow-up from a policy proposal that was submitted by Europol a couple of years ago, I don't remember when they had suggested that the legal address of the resource holder should be part of the RIPE, should be visible in the RIPE database, so that these would help them it would help them with their investigations. So as part of the task force, we analyzed whether indeed the legal address should be part of the resource holder. And this was the recommendation that based on the feedback that we had heard during the period of the task force, we could not come up with a definite outcome on whether indeed there is a value for that, for the community to be there. And indeed, what Brian mentioned, as the RIPE NCC, we have procedures based on what we provide publicly available and non-publicly available information. Publicly available information is publicly available for everyone. If an LEA comes with a legally binding order for us, we have to comply with it. If it does not come with a legally binding order, then we can only point to publicly available information. And I'm talking about Dutch and non-Dutch LEAs.
And I think it's fair to say there is a page on the NC website
Yes,
which
exactly. Exactly.
puts all this out and puts the transparency report.
Exactly.
And I think, and it's been an interesting theme so far of this meeting around newer people at the meeting and things. So we need to communicate this more clearly. We need to talk about it more regularly. So thank you for that.
And thank you for the feedback. Yeah.
If I may.
Please.
Okay, this is Peter again. So from memory in the discussion in the task force, in addition to the clarification that Maria kindly provided, and to trigger something that Farzaneh will be painfully aware of already, is that we have kind of a false dichotomy between Dutch court order gives you whatever the RIPE NCC has and whatever the court order says they should give out, versus making this all public for everybody in the world. Right? That's the issue here, and of course the elephant in the room that I was pointing to is the WHOIS discussion in the domain name world and so on and so forth. So I'm really wondering what this particular working group could do in that case, because that's something that needs to be discussed, or that touches more upon RIPE NCC internal procedures than any particular quote need or operational detail that could inform this. The false dichotomy is something that we won't get around here. And thank you. And of course I'm biased.
No, I mean, and thank you. And I mean, I don't know the answer to these questions, which is why which is why we're standing up here asking the working group and then the wider community.
Hi, Tobias. I have a comment from Mick Bagley in the chat. He says the NIST directive coming hard and fast for Europe has two pillars around data accuracy and data access requests that should also be considered.
I mean, I think somebody said there was the first mention of NIST 2 at some point yesterday, and they couldn't believe it hadn't been. Possibly it was yourself tweeting that. Yes, I knew I read it in a wonderful Twitter account somewhere. Yeah, yes, it may be a whole wonderful new brave world. Okay, so I'm going to move on from this. We're not under a huge amount of pressure to do this, but it's something that, you know, it's there. We do need to talk about it. If people would like to be involved in that conversation, please drop us an email. We'll see. We'll get, you know, more stakeholders involved, more working groups involved, and, you know, who knows what's going to come out of that? There is always an option to do nothing. There are also options to do other things. So we'll have to see. But it's there, and it would be wrong of us to ignore it, as the task force and the RIPE chair has asked us to look at it. Okay, I'm going to move on, in which case. And so now, yes, we have Patrick, hopefully on Mute Echo there, from the German anti-abuse group KG Abuse. Patrick, are you with us?
I'm with you. Hold a second, just to turn on my video.
Okay, well, I'm going to go and sit down rather than just stand up here, swaying slowly in the wind.
Well, good morning, everybody. I thought about getting to Belgrade, but I've been traveling around a lot recently, so I thought I'd skip that and just join you virtually. I'm head of the competence group anti-abuse at ICO in Germany. And Markus asked me to introduce you to our group and what we do at the group. So first of all, I thought I'd give a presentation. After a while, I gave up on that. And I thought it's probably better to just start talking about how the group came to be and do a historical, don't worry, I'm not going to go back into the medieval ages, view on how we proceeded, how we stumbled, and finally then proceeded more orderly to get where we are today. So initially, the group was founded many years ago as a second group next to the competence group that deals with email. And then email, or especially abuse within email, became so dominant that it kind of seemed that everything that had been talked about in the abuse group kind of doubled in the email group. So after a while, the abuse group came to a halt and nobody really attended that anymore. And then a few years passed, and then people found out there still were different types of abuse, obviously. And that's when they resurrected the group. And that's when I came into the game. I went to one of those meetings and was brave enough to raise my hands when they said, we need somebody to lead the group. So then I'm going to do it if you want to. So by the end of that day, I accidentally became leader of that group. That's how it all started. So the first thing we did in the group is what I think, and we're still not really done with that yet, but we've advanced quite a lot ever since then, is go from amateur to professional. I take it that most of you take pride in what they do, and we're the infrastructure people. Speaking from real world examples, we're the ones who build the roads. We put up signs, we erect houses. We don't run services in there, sometimes we do, but that's what we do, and we take pride in that, and we're very upset when others come and take it down, or ruin it, or abuse it. So historically speaking, there are many people I know in the anti-abuse working group that have been dealing with abuse and trying to handle abuse, even though they didn't have a mandate from the company they're working for. It's just that they couldn't take it that others were ruining what they had brought up. And that brings us to an interesting point, because probably if you have been fighting abuse, you've been also fighting an in-house battle, trying to make your management understand that there is abuse and you should receive funding and a budget to fight that abuse, to make it professional. And people will look at you and say, no, sorry, I don't know, abuse is something very annoying, and actually outbound abuse, that's our competitors' problem. If we have abuse coming from our platforms, it's good for us because it ruins our competitors. So nobody really wants to talk about that, but it's something that happens and happened many times. So one of the first things we did was trying to develop business justifications. Why should there be an abuse handling team? Why do you want that? And one of our members was very, very active, and he came up with calculations, and he was able to show up in calculations and prove that if a customer has abuse on one of their systems, and they have to talk to support two times within the contract time, the company will not be able to earn any money with that customer anymore. And he also did measures, and he said, well, it's nothing I really like to talk about, but we have to talk about it. We have about 10%, we dedicate about 10% of our resources to abuse that takes place on our platform. That means people who do abuse take money from us. They're using our resources. We have to buy hardware sooner. We have to pay more for electricity, blah, 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 all the whole thing. And with those numbers, he went to the to C-level, said, listen, there's something we should talk about. We have an internal growth market without our competitors, something we can deal with simply by battling abuse. And that marks the day he had a budget, because he could prove abuse costs that much. And of course, it's businesses. They're run by money, direct or indirectly. So he could prove there's abuse. He could prove at which point a customer would not bring in any money anymore. And that was when management decided, oh, there's something we could do. And the cool thing about that, and that particular thing of abuse, was it was abuse coming from the customers, and it was abuse taking only place on their own platform. So they had a growth market. So without even fighting or actually spending money on telling the rest of the world that they're better than the competitors, they would simply take care of their own platform and take care of their customers. So the cool story is he was able to bring abuse down from about 10% to 0 point something within 2 years. And the other thing is the churn rate went down, because they have an abuse team that actively contacts customers and says, listen, we think you have abuse on one of your devices or something's going wrong. And customers, that's probably hard for Germany, because Germans are really like, remember the Nazi thing, and dictators, and some people being what do you call it? Interested in your private data. Germans still are very aware of that. So when you call them and say, listen, you have abuse on your platform, like, why are you reading my data? This turned out to be not what everybody expected. It turned out that people actually are happy that they are calling them, and the churn rate sank. So it's even good for their business. Customers are staying with them. So we took that as a blueprint and came up with, how can you justify your business? Because many abuse departments and many of our members hadn't been there. They just came to be over the last years. One of the reasons was that we've been able to provide our members with templates to go. So let's look for that. Take a look at this here, examine this here, do these math and these calculations, and then go to your C-level and go for budget. So that's part of the work we did in the first years. Another thing, and that's something still work in progress, also due to the nature that there are still new things coming up all the time, is that we asked ourselves, what actually is abuse? And that was an interesting journey, because other than your business, the competence group for abuse or anti-abuse at the ECO goes through all different organization types we have that do business with the internet. So we have hosters, we have service providers, we have access providers, and so on and so forth. And whatever is abuse is a completely different story to each of those groups. A hoster is probably would say abuse is somebody putting up files for download on a website. If you're a service provider like email, you probably have malware, ransomware, spam, things like that. And if you're an access provider, you want to avoid people using your bandwidth, things like that. So abuse means something completely different to different groups. And we've been going through long discussions trying to figure out what actually makes abuse. It's only been recently that in cooperation, or actually mainly driven by the Names and Numbers group at ECO, we've come up with a table that names different types of abuse and names who probably should be held responsible for that, or whom you want to contact if you want to battle the abuse. Yeah, thanks for the sauces behind me. As you see that with the, let me take one of those here. Here we go. That's one of them. So that's something we've been discussing too, and it's as you might say or note, it's we bringing the business of, we have been bringing up the business of abuse over the last years from zero, trying to make it a professional thing. One of the things we noted, obviously, is there's large numbers of abuse out there, and if you want to deal with that, it means you need to automate things. So we've been investigating in frameworks, service providers out there that would help us to battle abuse. We've been, and that's the next thing, if you want to tell others about abuse, we've been talking about standardizing formats like XRF and things like that to exchange information that some abuse is taking place. That also has a long history of privacy, so who should know about what, who may or may not know about what. I feel you, because I've been following the who is discussions, things like that in the recent years. And also, we've been talking a lot about processes. For example, just to give a small idea, if you notice you have abuse, or one of your customers is like having abuse, you probably, the quickest way to inform them would be to send them an email. Actually, the quickest way to inform them would be to send them an SMS. But that cause in GXDs in Germany has a problem, because most of the time we don't know that our customers' SMS numbers. And even if they're changing their phones and numbers so often, it's kind of hard to keep track of that. So it's an unreliable path. So maybe email is better. So we're trying to send an email. If the email doesn't work, actually it's an automatic process, we get a bounce. That will trigger a print job. So the customer will have an email, a regular mail next day in their mailbox. Thinking about processes and doing this and designing them has been something we've talked about a lot, because obviously if you want to fight abuse, it's going to cost a lot, because there is a lot of abuse out there. So you really need to look at the numbers and find out how can you have great effect at low cost. How would I say that? Yeah. One of the things we have, at least in Germany, with the politics, is they believe that there's something like the German borders of the internet. And you have to tell them, listen, there are no German borders of internet. You can't defend Germany at the borders of the German internet. Actually, it only works if you become international, because those who do abuse are international. They use platforms in one country, come from another country, and buy data from a third country and things like that. So one of the things we've been working in our group, and lockdown really had a hard impact on that, is we've been visiting different countries with our abuse group every year, and trying to learn and get in contact with the local people dealing with abuse, and trying to work with them, trying to do some networking, get known, because the day you have abuse on a platform and it comes from a certain country, it really pays to know people. So that's something we've been doing too. Now, just before we're going to end, is recently we've turned to not only battle abuse that is there, but also trying to become better at avoiding being abused. And that means training people. It does not only mean training people, it also, obviously, it also means taking care of your platforms and systems and trying to make sure you have everything is up to date and secure, blah, blah, blah. But I want to go for training people. We're about to work more in terms of awareness, trying our customers, trying to tell them what they should not do and what they should do and how they should behave if they think there's something that would be abusive. Somebody who's been doing very good groundwork for that is Melanie in Switzerland. If you want to search for that, I'll type it into here. Melanie, that's what they called. It's a project in Switzerland, and they're very good at fighting abuse and making people aware of what is going on, especially also by using a language the recipients will understand, because we are experts in what we do and most other peoples are not, and that is often a communication barrier. On a professional level, we've also have begun to train our members in special trainings, like, listen, there's a certain situation, this kind of abuse has taken place. What is it that you're going to do? And then we let them come up with ideas, and the trainer takes a look at them, and then they give feedback and improve them. So that's what we've been doing recently. We're all very, very eager to get back and meet in real life, which will start in our group next year. Next year we're going to behave and not going to do the Oktoberfest thing. Because something that has shown over the recent year is that what really makes all of the difference is get to meet people and talk with them, because battling abuse is something that requires trust, and trust is something that is established when people meet. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. So just one question that I have, and other people may have questions. You mentioned, Melanie, there, my quick Googling did not turn up anything other than a lot of Instagram accounts. So if you could put the relevant URLs into chat, that would be really useful. The other thing you mentioned, because the discussion about what is abuse is, it's a gift that keeps on giving. But if you have any other materials that your group has, has got that can be shared, that might be useful, that would be very interesting.
I'll share a link with you in a chat later.
Cool.
It refers to a news thing that has gone up by ECO. I'm not sure if it's in English, but anyway, I'll post what I find.
Yeah, I mean, it's just information is useful. Any other questions, comments, please? Hi,
my name is Farzan Abadi. Sorry, I have another question. This is my favorite topic. So
it's everybody's favorite topic.
So I just so a lot of these abuse groups that are tackling DNS abuse or IP abuse, usually in order to create that trust, you need to have a certain level of confidentiality, which in return affects your transparency. Do you think that transparency in your work is also an important aspect, and are you doing something about that so that you won't be as opaque as other abuse groups are, which can result in, well, not efficiency necessarily, but people not knowing what your processes are in your work and who the members are and how you are tackling the IP abuse issue?
So, well, thank you for the question. There's two aspects of transparency. I think there's a level of internal transparency within the group, and then there's transparency to the public. And they are diametral. Actually, the competence group anti-abuse is just like Fight Club. Whatever happens in the Fight Club, it stays in the Fight Club. That's what sorry for that, for pulling that one, but anyway, actually, it's an invite group only, and whatever we talk in there stays within the group. And that actually is the foundation that enables all members in there to talk about what is going on their platforms. We're not there to blame anyone. So this is very important. And then there's the counter interest, also by head of ECO, because they want to burst out what does the Senate news and tell about all the cool things we've done. Most of the things we do are very touchy, and we're not really, some of the members are not very happy being public about that, because it deals with problems they're having on their platforms. So it's an ongoing battle. We don't have a rule for that yet, but it's something that's going on.
I mean, I think it's exactly that. It's trying to find that right balance, because I know,
yes,
my clients will say a bunch of things if they know that nobody else is going to, even we are just going to hear about it in the end, Ren, and they will say very different things when it's when it's elsewhere. So listen, I don't think there are any other questions. So Patrick, thank you very much for your time this morning.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so we have our third Phantom Zone 2D presentation now this morning, and it's from Johannes Gilger talking about urlscan.io. Johannes, are you with us? It's all a bit seancey.
Yes, I am. Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Excellent. We can hear you and see you. So I'm going to sit down again.
Yeah, great. I'll start sharing my screen in a second. I just wanted to say hello, good morning. Nice to meet you all. I'm a little bit of a newbie, if you will. This is my first time attending a RIPE meeting. I actually had to look up what RIPE actually does shortly before the meeting. I was invited by Marcus from the German Federal Office of Information Security to talk about urlscan.io, the platform urlscan.io. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. In the context of abuse, what urlscan is, how you can leverage it, how you can maybe leverage it further than you have been doing so far, and how it might be able to tie into your workflow in terms of manual as well as automated abuse handling. Yeah, so that's me. A little bit of background. I'm the CEO and founder of urlscan.io. urlscan has been around since late 2016 as kind of a community side project, if you will. And then we spun it out into a commercial company in early 2020. And so that's what I've been doing since kind of full time, is working on urlscan, both on the community side as well as on the commercial side. But obviously today we're just going to talk about the freely accessible community aspects of the platform. If there's any questions at any point in time, please just interrupt or put it in the chat. I don't know how these meetings usually go. I don't know the etiquette. So if I'm stepping on anyone's toes, please excuse me. This is my very first time. So let's kick things off, and I'll start sharing my screen so we look at the same thing while we're talking about it. Yes, I really want to share my screen, I'm sure this time. Okay, so this should start sharing my screen. Yes, I can see it myself. Great. So urlscan.io, this is what I want to talk about today. This is kind of my baby, if you will. Some of you might have already used it. Some of you haven't. I'll just describe it as if you hadn't seen it before. So what urlscan.io is a sandbox for websites. That's one way to describe it. Some of our customers have called us VirusTotal for websites, which is another kind of fun way to describe it, I guess. The idea is very simple. urlscan is a platform that allows you to analyze a suspicious of any URL, any website that you're getting in a structured and safe and repeatable manner. So let's use an example. Let's say you get an email and there's a link in that email, and you want to analyze that link in a safe and structured way. You can just take that link, put it into urlscan to be scanned, right? You can just go to the website. You don't even have to sign up or anything. Put it in the box. You can select a couple of options about this, but we'll get to that in a minute. And then you can just kick off the scan, right? Okay, I got the link, ripe.net. What is it? I'm not sure, right? It might be malicious. So let's just analyze it. And analyzing really means there's a browser process running in the cloud somewhere that is going out to the website. It's opening the website like you would open it on your own device. It will record what the website is doing, like which IPs are being contacted, which networks are being contacted, which domains and host names are being contacted. We'll take all of that information, annotate some of that information, write back that information to the database, and then kind of redirect you to this result for this one time that you scanned this page. And so this is what this is the page that we're on right now. This is the result page. This is the URL that we submitted, ripe.net. It was redirected to www.ripe.net. We can see kind of high-level information compiled from the raw information that we have in the database. This is really just a pretty summary, if you will. What's the primary IP address of the page? When was it submitted for scanning? Where was it submitted from? Some summary information, kind of the things that you want to have as a high-level summary, like how many IPs were contacted, what's the main IP, which network does the main IP belong to, in this case, Cloudflare, what's the umbrella rank, the Cisco umbrella rank for the domain. And then we have more information further down here where we have the individual IPs and which networks they belong to. So that's annotated information. We can look at it from an IP level. We can look at it from a host name and domain level, like which host names were contacted, which domains were contacted, how much data was transferred, that sort of stuff. We can look at the full resolution screenshot if we wanted to. We can look at whether the page was being redirected from one URL to another one, look at technologies that were detected on the page. So there's a lot of information to take in, right? And usually you don't look at everything. Usually you look at one thing or two things, and you have a very fixed set of things that you're interested in. And it very much depends on your use case, right? URLscan is a very generic platform that allows you to scan websites, and then what you do with that information is really up to you. So some people might just use URLscan already knowing that a specific URL is malicious, and they just might want to use it to just get a screenshot, or they just want to see, is the page still working? Is it still up? Is it still active? And so, yeah, it depends on your use case. And this, again, this is the interactive use case. This is me using the UI. But one thing that is one of our guiding principles is that every bit of functionality and every piece of information you can see on this platform is also available as an API. So if you ever figure out, oh, this is an interesting kind of workflow, this is an interesting bit of information, you can work with our APIs to do that, right? You can work with the APIs to automatically submit URLs, to automatically retrieve those results, and then kind of pull out the pieces of information that you might be interested in. And as you can see, there's even more information, right? You can look at individual HTTP transactions, because while the page is loading, we record all the individual HTTP requests and responses. We actually store some of these. We hash the content of these responses, so you can search for the hashes later. We look at outgoing links from the page, look at things like what are the JavaScript variables on the page, which would give you an indication whether there's certain frameworks in place, for example. We have some really neat features. You can actually download the whole DOM tree, the document object model, from the page. So again, there's a wealth of information. And in most cases, you're probably just going to look at one or two things and already know, oh, yeah, that's interesting, or it's not interesting, or I see what I wanted to see. And if we use another example, if you scan another page, it would look even more interesting, because there might be dozens of different host names and networks and providers being contacted just to basically render a single website. I'm sure you're aware of that. So how can you use that, right? What's the whole point of this? So the point of this platform is that compiling all of this information manually is possible, right? You can do it, but it's a ton of work. And doing that repeatedly in a structured and kind of consistent way is almost impossible manually. So you need automation. You need a platform to do that. And URLscan does exactly that. In the context of abuse, the way we've seen it used is people and customers scanning websites or URLs that they don't know anything about, but also customers and people, users scanning websites that they already know to be malicious. And so in that way, URLscan is just another way of kind of preserving the snapshot of that page, because you have everything in one place. This is what the website looked like. These are the IPs that were contacted. And if you scan the page again, by the way, you get a new snapshot, right? So you can always scan the page like every hour, every day, and see if it changes. And even if it's not working anymore right now, you can go back and say, well, here's a historical record, here's a historical scan of that page. And by the way, this is what it looked like yesterday. And this is when the page actually had, I don't know, phishing content on it, right? So for abuse purposes, it's a great tool for archival and kind of documentation purposes. But that's kind of the very straightforward use case of using URL scan as a user, right? You go to the website, you put in a URL that you want to submit, you submit it, you get back this piece of information. You can share the result of that snapshot with whoever you want to share it with. That's great. But, and so that kind of takes us to the other use case. That is just things you are finding, right? That are just things that you are submitting. And one of the major kind of unique aspects of URL scan is that it is a community platform that is used by tens of thousands of people every day, and commercial customers as well, obviously. And all of these people are submitting hundreds of thousands of URLs to us every day. And most, or almost probably all users of the platform and all customers of the platform are not just interested in things that they submit themselves, but also interested in what other people are submitting. And this is where our historical data comes in, because every scan that's performed on the platform is by default stored permanently, and it's made available through the search index in the historical scans, where you are able to go in and search historical scans for a specific website by dozens of different attributes, right? So let's go back to the example we had earlier. We scanned the ripe.net website. So we look at this snapshot, and it might be interesting to us, and it might already answer the question that we have. But in most cases, if you look at something, you're also interested as kind of the next logical question. You're going to be interested in the context of that page, of that scan. So given that ripe.net is the host name, has this host name been seen before? Has it been scanned before? If it has, how did the website look like when it was, for example, scanned yesterday, right? How far back does it go? And the host name is just, or the host name or domain are just one of the many attributes that you can pivot on. The same could be said about the IP address. Okay, so here's a host name, it's pointing to this IP address, that's great. But has this IP address been seen in connection with maybe other host names? Has it been scanned, right? And that is a question that our search API or search functionality allows you to answer. So we already kind of see a preview here for ripe.net, where it says this ripe.net was scanned more than 1,800 times on URL scan. And now we could pivot into the search and look at these previous scans, right? And we can see this one 48 seconds ago. It's probably somebody on this meeting, I guess. And then 4 minutes and 7 minutes. So probably all folks on the meeting, or one of them would be me. But then as we scroll down, we can see other historical submissions, days and weeks, and maybe even years ago, all the way going back to 2016 when we launched. And so that's one way to kind of look at things, filter for things. For you as providers, as platform providers, ISPs, again, I don't know exactly who's in the audience, so I'm trying to kind of find the right angles that are interesting to you. There's also other things you can filter by. You can filter by IPs, or like pivot on IP addresses, and I'm trying to find an IPv4, so we actually have something that's a little bit more approachable, but let's use an IPv6 maybe. You could pivot on an IP, sorry, or you could even pivot on the whole subnet of that IP. So you could like specify a /24 and then get all the results that are either hosted on that IP or talking to that IP. You can do the same thing for networks, for ASN, right? You can go in and say, show me everything that is hosted on an ASN called Cloudflare, right? You could do that by name or by numbers. So if you have the AS numbers, you can just put in the numbers as well. That's obviously more robust. I tried some things earlier, right? German Telecom, for example. And you always get that list of results. And you can still kind of even further narrow that down, right? So you could say, show me everything on Cloudflare with a DE domain within the past 24 hours, maybe, right? Okay, and so that's like a very limited set of results for that specific combination of filters. And so that would allow you to tap into what other people are submitting to your UL-Scan that might be relevant to you, that maybe you want to look at as kind of a feed of interesting things. And by its very nature, your UL-Scan is very much, has a very high signal to noise ratio, right? For most people, they submit URLs that they already know to be malicious. And so you'll find a lot of malicious URLs that way. So another aspect I wanted to talk about why kind of UL-Scan or a platform like UL-Scan is unique, and it's also necessary to combat abuse and especially phishing and things like that nowadays. And why this kind of concept of having a publicly accessible repository and database of these things is absolutely crucial, is that there's multiple types of phishing by my experience at this point, like web-based website phishing or brand impersonation, whatever you want to call it nowadays. And some of these have been around for a long time, and some of these are obvious ones, like, oh yeah, I'm going to stand up a new domain called cloudflare-secure-login.com, right? And then I'm going to put a fake Okta page on it and try to attack employees of that company, of Cloudflare, for example. And I'm using Cloudflare because there was a recent example where they were targeted. And so that is kind of the old school way. I'm going to get my own domain and then put a phishing website on it. But thanks to new technologies like certificate of transparency and lots of providers doing passive DNS ingestion, it's very noisy, right? It's very obvious. There's other providers that would look at domains and do machine learning detection based on the domain name and then on the age of the domain, and they would flag it, right? And so being successful with that, it's still possible, I guess, especially if you're going after smaller players like a small Eastern European bank where, like, frankly, major Western tech companies don't care to the same extent they would do with a Western company. Yes, you might be successful, but it's very noisy and you're not going to stay online for very long. And so there's two other ways of performing phishing that are not as noisy or as obvious nowadays. And one is you can compromise legitimate websites and then just put your phishing website in a subdirectory. That works really well because if you compromise a good website, it has a very good domain and IP reputation. I've personally seen government websites being compromised. And then, I mean, if you have a phishing website on a government domain, that's like winning the lottery, right? Because no protection tool out there will flag a government domain that's been around for I don't know how many years as being malicious, but you were able to compromise the WordPress running on that government website. So you could put a phishing website in a subdirectory. Other ways to do phishing include using legitimate platforms. So one example would be basically all platforms, and I'm using a couple of examples, but it's the same for all of them, that allow users to upload user-generated content and host it on the platform's domains and infrastructure. So like Amazon S3, right? You can create an Amazon S3 bucket and put files into that bucket and then host it on the Amazon S3 domain. And that has perfect domain registration, reputation. And nobody in their right mind would block the Amazon S3 domain. The same is true for, I don't know, Backblaze, which is another provider. DigitalOcean is one of them as well, right? So page domain backblaze.com, and they often have like automatically generated random domain names for these buckets, for these websites that are being put up. But I'm pretty sure if we open up one of them, yeah, sure enough, like, okay, so somebody put up a bucket and uploaded something, and they're probably using a free tier of, I don't know, put in a fake credit card. I don't even know what's going on in that regard. And they just uploaded a phishing page, right? And there's no way to take that phishing page down based on the domain reputation or the age of the domain or anything. It's not something that would be numerable because this is not a newly published, probably not a newly published, it's not a newly published domain in any zone file. It's not like this host name would appear in any certificate because it's probably a wildcard TLS certificate. It's probably also a wildcard DNS record, right? So it's just blending in. And so kind of the only way to find these phishing pages nowadays is frankly to be on the receiving end of them or at the very least in the middle somewhere, as kind of like seeing emails coming through whatever platform you have, where emails are going to employees of a big company, and you're able to look at the URLs in those emails. But if you're talking about certain individuals, the only way to see these phishing pages is if you're the actual recipient of that phishing attempt. And we've seen that happen where somebody would submit a URL to us and it would be a phishing page. And based on the content of that URL, it was very obvious that that specific page was created just for that one individual. And the submission was performed by that individual or by someone on his staff, his or her staff, because there's nobody else that would have received that link, that URL to that phishing page. It was really targeted at one high value individual, right? And so it's not something, that's what I said, you need this community aspect and you need this open platform, because it's not something where you can just say, yeah, I'm going to build my own phishing detection. I'm just going to throw a lot of money on it and crawl the internet, and Google crawls the internet, and even they are not able to find a page that's put into a compromised web server into a subdirectory unless they already know the URL, right? So sorry, I hammered this point a little bit too much, I guess. So yeah, so this is how you can use URL scan, and this is probably why you want to use it, is to get reports in a structured way if you find things yourself, but also to look at what other people might be submitting. It's very easy to use, it's very approachable, you don't have to sign up. There's a couple of options that are interesting, especially for abuse purposes, I guess. The most important one is the visibility. So whenever you submit a page to be scanned on URL scan, you can select whether it should be visible to the community or whether it should be private just to yourself. So public means it's visible to anyone using the community version. Private means it's private just to yourself. Nobody else will be able to see it. And unlisted is kind of in between, where it will be visible to our commercial customers on the URL Scan Pro platform, but it won't be visible to the community. And the idea with unlisted is that we have a lot of customers that are looking to do something with that information, something positive, I would say, right? It could be a government entity, it could be an internet service provider, it could be a software, a security company that is looking to improve its security and detection software. So all of these downstream customers are trying to take that fire hose of information from URL scan and do whatever they can with in their respective business areas, right? One might be takedown, one might be just blocking, one might be detection improvements, all of these different things. So keep that in mind. If you scan a URL that you know to be malicious and you want as many people as possible to see it, you can put it as public. And if you want it to be private, you can choose private. You can choose where you want to scan the page from as well. So let's say you have a phishing page and you think, well, this is really targeted at users from my country. Then you might be lucky and one of those countries is yours, right? And you could go in and say, let's try to scan it from Spain because I think the page only works from Spanish IP addresses. But that's really it. There's not too many options. If you do sign up for a free user account, you actually get a free user account, get a little bit more convenience, creature comforts. One thing that you can do is you get a bulk submission form where you can just put in multiple URLs, kind of select the same options, select some the country that you want to scan it from. You can add tags to the scan. So you could have something that says like, oh yeah, I think it's phishing. So I'm going to add a phishing tag. I'm going to add a malicious tag, whatever. And then you could do a bulk submission. It's really just a convenience feature. But another great thing about having a user account, and again, you don't have to create one, is if you submit something while you're signed in, you're able to find those submissions later by using a certain search modifier. So you can say, show me everything I submitted, or if you're part of a team account, my team submitted. And that way you kind of have your private search index, because it will just return search results performed by yourself. Yeah, so the API, I mentioned the API. Everything we do is available as an API, and there's very extensive API documentation about how to use the API in general, how to use the specific API endpoints, for example, for submitting things, for retrieving information, for searching for scans. It's very approachable. There's a separate page just for the search API because it's so powerful. The search is based on Elasticsearch, so it will allow you to build perform simple term searches like show me everything for, I don't know, ripe.net, but also build really complex searches where it would say show me everything for ripe.net and so and so and so and so, and only in the past 24 hours. And the scans that we index are searchable by dozens of different fields. And really, it's really crucial to understand what these fields actually contain and how you can search them if you want to be very effective and like do really interesting searches. I mean, if all you want to do is filter by a specific IP or domain, you should be fine, but it still pays off to understand what you can actually search for and what's contained within these fields. So I think I'm almost out of time. I think the last thing I wanted to say is, how can you work with us? Just reach out to us via email if you have kind of questions, if you have feedback. If you want to work with us, collaborate with us, I think there's a lot of different avenues that we could work together. One thing I'm personally very interested in is if you're, for example, an ISP and you're in the position to work with us to provide certain resources that we might not be able to get ourselves, that would be very interesting for obvious reasons. So yeah, let's I don't know, let's just figure that out. Just reach out to me via email, and I think I'm going to open it up for questions now because I think that was 20 minutes.
Very bouncy stage. Johannes, thank you very much for that. Do we have any questions, comments, etc., etc.? No, it seems you explained everything very clearly.
Maybe one more thing. I realized I completely forgot to mention it, but apart from just this generic platform that just gives back the information, like this is the IPs that were contacted, the domains that were contacted, we also have a phishing detection or brand impersonation detection system in place. And that's honestly why the majority of customers use us. So we are able to detect phishing and brand impersonation against more than 800 brands at this point. And once you submit a page to YOLScan, it actually has content on it. And so it's based on the content of the page, and we detect it. This is what it will look like, right? So let's say you get this link in your email this morning, you submit it, and it will say, yes, we think this is malicious, and by the way, it's targeting ING Group. Thank you for telling us. And this is a good example because this one says this is the only time this particular domain was scanned, or this particular hostname was scanned on YOLScan.io. So if you hadn't submitted it, it wouldn't have been seen, right? And that's kind of one of the primary reasons for people to use it, I guess. And I don't know why I forgot to mention it in the presentation, but we have this phishing detection. If you think something is missing, you can report it to us. You can, again, send an email. You can leave a verdict on the page where it says, I think this is malicious, and I think this is, I don't know, phishing or brand impersonation or social engineering or all kinds of other scams, right? And kind of give that feedback back to us and also back to the bigger community, because even if the page is not, like, what is malicious really lies in the eye of the beholder, right? Like, yes, a PayPal login page, a fake PayPal login page is malicious, probably no question about it. But what about a page which is kind of like asking for information from someone? Like, is it malicious? Is it not? It depends on what's happening with the information, and it's not something that you can always automatically determine, right? So yeah, just kind of saying that as a kind of a closing statement, I guess.
Okay, cool. Listen, thank you very much. Very interesting. I think you did very well for your first RIPE meeting. Don't worry about that at all. Okay, so that's that. AOB. Apparently we have some, please.
It's me again.
It's all good.
How's everybody? So I thought that for RIPE sessions, the commercial product presentations were not allowed, and we have seen some commercial presentations.
So there's no rule, but I mean, this is a website which is available.
It is not, it is a commercial product. They charge you for all the features that they went through. I'm not, so a lightning talk, so I wanted to submit a lightning talk, and I saw this like kind of clause there that if it's a commercial product, you should not submit it. And I thought that that would apply to all the sessions, so I might be wrong. But if that is a rule, then I think that we should adhere to it.
So it's not a rule. It's not something that we're not looking for sales pitches, and this is something we discussed with Johannes before, before his talk. Awareness of things. There is a, this is not something we would have on every session or otherwise, but sometimes there are tools that are interesting and we talk about them, but they're under, okay, present it neutrally. But there's no hard and fast rule if you cannot do this. We realize that the audience are not interested in sales pitches or otherwise, so it's not something that we're looking for or encouraging. And certainly from the point of view of the plenary, the PC, and I can swap hats a little there, we're absolutely not looking for that. Now and again, in a working group where the working group chairs are free to select their content, we might have something like that. But it's not something that's going to crop up very often. But there is no hard and fast rule. But there is community feedback like this, which influences the working group chairs in what future people we have talk at the working group.
Okay, thank you.
Neil?
I think you've dealt with that more or less completely.
Can you just, who are you?
Sorry, I'm Neil O'Reilly. I'm the RIPE Vice Chair. Long years ago, I used to be a working group chair. And it was made very clear to me in those days by the then RIPE Chair that RIPE doesn't do endorsements. RIPE doesn't take sales pitches. But RIPE has always tried to allow the community to be made aware of interesting products, whether commercial or free open source or whatever, because we need to know about the technologies to be informed to do for each of the attendees to do their job. So just to complement what you've already explained, Brian.
Thank you. And I could be very clear that neither Tobias nor myself nor Marcus received any private jets or yachts or anything else in consideration of any presentations. Sorry, yes, please.
I stand by this weekend. So for example, with products and tools that combat abuse, there are a lot of privacy concerns and a lot of other concerns that we need to address. If they are bringing up, if we want to have presentations about these tools, as well as talking about these tools and the features, we have to also talk about how they affect privacy and how they mitigate those issues. So in the future, if we want to know about all these great tools that are out there, commercial or not, probably it's good to also have an aspect of how do you also balance these rights that people have, and it might be impacted by using that tool. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Anything else, folks? Seeing nothing, I shall say that we are always open to agenda items for RIPE 86. And bear in mind, this is anything. This is discussion. This is policies. This may be a presentation, an interaction. There is no set format from on high. So please, if you're interested in presenting to the working group, obviously the mailing list is there all the time. But if you're interested in talking to the working group, either virtually or physically at a RIPE meeting, then please contact the working group chairs and do let us know. So all that remains for me at this point in time is to say thank you all very much for your time this morning. Thank you to our speakers, to all the excellent NCC staff, venue staff, and our stenographers. And hopefully we shall see you all in Rotterdam, I believe, in spring of next year. Thank you very much. morning, everyone. I know we're a little bit early, so I'm just talking so you don't stare at some weird guy on the stage and wonder what's going on. Actually, it's time. So, hello, everyone. If you are looking for the RIPE DNS working group, you're in the right place. If you're looking for something else, you're probably still in the right place, but you may want to be somewhere else. So we've got I think a pretty nice agenda this time. So we'll just get started. Do we have the agenda on the screen? Yeah. So we've got a little bit of administrivia to start off with. Then we'll get started with our first presenter. So one thing that's going to be happening is we're creating a new task force. Joao, do you want to talk to that briefly?
So some of you may remember at the last RIPE meeting, May, I don't remember where we were, but we were somewhere. We talked about creating a document, a RIPE document again around what one should commit to, what one should abide to when running an open resolver as a public service type, I don't know, Google DNS, something like that, right? There were some ideas circulating at that time about a centralized source for a regulation about that in the European continent. We thought, well, maybe this community would be in a better position to get that done. So we stalled on that for a little bit, summer, whatever excuses I can offer you. Sorry about that. In the end, we have this proposed charter. We have been talking to the cooperation working group because I think they will have useful input on the series of issues that surround this. It's not only a technical matter. So if we work together, it will be better. That is the text of the proposed charter, the timeline as soon as possible. If we can present the RIPE document by the next RIPE meeting in Rotterdam, that would be super good. Everyone is come to join. I think I have a few people who have already showed the interest. Martin, for instance, since I'm looking at you. And the idea is if the working group doesn't have anything against it, and same thing with the cooperation working group, which is taking place in the other room right now, but we have the cooperation working group chair. After lunch, okay. I always get these things wrong. The idea is to then request the RIPE chair to create the task force during the RIPE plenary, community plenary later on this afternoon. So anyone have any comments at this point? No? I'll take that as a support of the working group since we already discussed this last time and they seem to be support. Thank you very much. Resuming the normal program.
Great, thank you, Joao. The next thing on our agenda is the happy business of working group chair working group co-chair selection. So we put out a call on the mailing list following all of our processes. We had one candidate come forward, Willem, and I think he's going to be an excellent candidate. This does mean that this is my last time as the working group co-chair. So after today, you will never have to worry about what I have to say again. And I will just retire in bliss. So anyway, congratulations, Willem. And thank you very much for volunteering. And I look forward to all your contributions. And with that, I think we're done with the administrivia and things like that. So hopefully our first presenter is online and able to give us a nice presentation about comparing the different ways of querying the DNS. Yeah.
All right. Hello. I think I should be supposed to see the slides now, which I'm not. Perfect. So I hope you can all hear me. Can I get a quick feedback? Okay,
We can hear you.
perfect. So hi everyone there. First of all, thank you for the invitation. My name is Luca, and I'm a recent graduate from the Technical University of Munich. With me today is also Mike, who will be helping answering some of your questions afterwards. So we were wondering if encrypted DNS can be fast, and therefore had to look at the recently standardized DNS over QUIC and its impact on web applications. So how can I click the next slide? Sorry. Could you please advance to the next slide?
We are giving you the permissions.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
You should now be able to move the slides.
Awesome, thank you. So as we all know, web traffic has shifted towards HTTPS in the last decade. Still, DNS traffic is largely unencrypted, which leads to privacy issues such as ISPs being able to derive user profiles from observing DNS traffic. Now, this is addressed by DNS over TLS and also DNS over HTTPS, the latter one being more popular due to its simple integration into web browsers. Yet, both are constrained by the round trips required due to the TCP and TLS protocol stack. So you will have at least 2 round trips to establish a connection. Now, QUIC has been introduced as a modern transport protocol that combines connection establishment and also encryption into a 1 or even a 0 RTT handshake. And similarly, DNS over QUIC has been recently standardized and aims to provide DNS privacy with minimal latency. And this leads to our main question: what is the impact of DOQ on web performance? Good. So to analyze this, we need to first identify target resolvers for our experiments. And for this, we use CMAP to scan the IPv4 address space from a machine in our university network in April 22. We find over 1,200 DOQ resolvers, with 313 additionally supporting DOH and DOUDP. And these are the ones we also use for our measurements. Now, as you can see here, so the red dots are all the target resolvers that we found. And there is a bit of an uneven distribution. So most target resolvers are in EU, in Asia, and in the US. But still, so the blue dots here are our vantage points. So still we conduct measurements from all 6 continents. So for the methodology, for the page loads, we use Selenium with Chromium and the top 10 most popular web pages from the Tranco top list. And as local resolver, we use DNS Proxy. So DNS Proxy is an open source project that enables us to query upstream resolvers using DNS over QUIC, over HTTPS, and also over UDP. Now, for every web page, every DNS protocol, and every upstream resolver, we conduct measurements from all 6 vantage points in parallel. On the individual vantage points, though, the measurements are done sequentially. Now, measurements are repeated every 48 hours over the course of 1 week in April 22. And a measurement includes 2 navigations. First one is the cache warming, and the second one is the actual web performance measurement. Now, the cache warming is done for 3 reasons. First of all, and mainly to populate the DNS cache of the upstream resolver. This should rule out any influences of recursive lookups by the upstream. Secondly, we negotiate a quick version and also receive an address validation token of the server. And last, we receive a TLS 1.3 session resumption ticket from the server if that is supported by the server. So on to the evaluation. In the end, we had roughly 57,000 samples per protocol. And for DOQ, we find that all servers support TLS 1.3 session resumption, At the same time, there's no support for zero RTT connections. Furthermore, the vast majority of servers use Quick version 1 and DOQ draft version 2. For DOH, we see 99% of servers supporting TLS 1.3 session resumption. And as with DOQ, also no servers that support zero RTT, and also no servers that support TFO. Also, all DOH requests are using HTTP2. Okay, one last thing before I show you the plots. So we mainly looked at two metrics. The first one is the first contentful paint event. That is the time until the first visible image or text is shown on the screen. And this happens fairly early in the page load, which is why we expect a larger influence of DNS on this metric. The other one is the page load time, which we define as the difference between start of the page load and onload event. We then compute the medians for each combination of vantage point, of resolver, and DNS protocol. And this should account for the differences between resolvers and vantage points. As you have seen, the geographical distribution, for instance, that is a bit uneven. And we then go on and compare the per protocol medians that correspond to a pair of vantage point and resolver. Great. So let us start with the first contentful paint event. So here we can see how DOQ in blue and DOH in green perform against DOUDP, which is the vertical line here basically, which is also the baseline for this plot. As to how to read this plot. So for example, here it shows that 40% of DOQ measurements delay the FCP event by 10% or less. And at the same time, 40% of DOH measurements delay it by 20% or less. You may also notice a small fraction of DOQ and DOH queries here being faster than DOUDP. And we attribute this to the missing retransmission mechanism on the transport layer for UDP, right? So instead, DOUDP has to wait for an application layer timeout from the browser to happen, which is longer than the transport layer timeout from Quick and TCP. And now looking at the tail here, 20% of the DOQ measurements delay the FCP event by 20% or more, whereas for DOH, it is 20% of measurements that delay it for almost 40% or more. And that leads us to our first key takeaway, that DOQ significantly improves over DOH. But now let's have a look at the page load time. All right. So we have prepared here a bit of a matrix. So on this axis, you can see the different vantage points. We have Europe, Asia, Africa, and Oceania. And here we have the different, or 4 different web pages. We have Wikipedia, Instagram, Microsoft, and YouTube. And the number in the brackets here represents the average amount of DNS queries that are required to load this page. The plots are also color-coded. So lighter color means a higher percentage of DOQ page loads being faster than DOH. And we quickly see that it gets darker towards the more complex web pages. So the improvement diminishes when we have more DNS queries, right? Also, so maybe I give you a bit of time to just digest this graph. So here, the middle line is basically the baseline DOQ. The purple one is DOUDP, and the green one is DOH. Maybe let's just start looking at the basic or the more simple web pages. Here, especially in Africa and Oceania, DOQ improves the page load time over DOH by up to 10% in the median. And at the same time, it worsens the PLT over DNS over UDP by up to 10% in the median. right? So DO-UDP is left of the baseline and DOH is right of the baseline. So the takeaway is that cost of encryption is the largest for these simple web pages. And looking at the more complex pages, the page load time for the protocols get closer as the cost of encryption amortizes, the more DNS queries are required. So here we can see that DOQ pretty much catches up to DO-UDP and DOH. So there's not much of a difference to see anymore, which means that here the cost of encryption is the smallest. So our key takeaway is that DOQ catches up to DO-UDP with increasing complexity of web pages. All right, so on to the conclusion. We saw that encrypted DNS does not have to be a compromise. And DOQ improves over DOH with up to 10% faster page loads for simple web pages. And it also catches up to DO-UDP with increasing complexity of web pages. Please remember that we have only observed 10 websites and 313 resolvers. So it will be really interesting to see measurements with more pages and resolvers in the future. This is also an ongoing work. And we are also interested to see if zero RTT will be supported at some point. And lastly, another dimension to look at is DNS over HTTPS 3. So support for that was recently added by Cloudflare DNS, by Google Android, and also Google Public DNS. And we will then be able to see how the added overhead of the HTTP request response model will hold up to the plain DOQ without HTTP overhead. And to finally answer the question that we posed in the title, yes, DOQ makes encrypted DNS much more appealing for the web. And I hear an echo, but it's okay. And yeah, that's it from my side. So have a look at our paper if you're interested in a deep dive and some more findings. Also, code and dataset are all publicly available. And we are ready for any questions that you might have.
Thank you. I think that was really interesting. So I don't see any questions online or at the queue. So I'll add one of my own. I think these results are nice because they kind of match our intuition, right? Or do you think there was anything unexpected about the results that you got here?
Actually, no, I wouldn't say so. It's pretty much what you would have expected from the theory.
Yeah.
Maybe Mike, you have another opinion on that?
Okay, are we gonna, I don't know how to.
This is Mike, can you hear me?
Great.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Luca, for presenting this work. I presented this work 2 days ago here at IMC, and sorry I couldn't be there in Belgrade with you. So yeah, this was pretty much what we expected from the theory of the faster handshakes for encryption and transport. However, it was still interesting to see how those dimensions shift the more DNS queries you use, right? So the point where Luca showed, okay, the impact on page load time, that for simpler web pages, this is pretty huge impact. And on larger web pages, this is essentially the same as before.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that's an interesting takeaway, definitely. I see we have someone standing at the line.
Yeah, Farzan Abadi. I just wanted to ask Luca if when you looked at the resolver providers, did you see so there's Cloudflare, there's Google, and there are a bunch of other tech corporations. Did you see some kind of diversity among the providers, or are they just these big corporations that are providing it?
So for DNS over QUIC, it was quite a mix, and I believe there was no Google DNS involved. So the biggest provider for DOQ, I believe, was AdGuard DNS. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mike. And as it was a huge mix. So I believe most were probably also not designed to be production ready, but we are not sure about that.
Thank you.
I also had one hopefully maybe final question here. I was surprised to see that there's no zero RTT support anywhere in the universe. Do you have plans to run an experiment with a lab or something like that, where you can just do comparison of projected results?
So that's a question for Mike.
So we looked into this in a study in the lab where we compared one RTT DOQ versus zero RTT DOQ, and you pretty much get what you would expect it to get. So yeah, in the first flight, you send the DNS query and you directly get back the answer. And of course, this scales up like we have seen here to be even faster and be on par with DNS over UDP. So this is also what we would expect to get from resolvers in the wild if they support zero RTT.
Cool, that's good to hear. I mean, for me, that's the real exciting endpoint, is a near UDP performance from this. Yeah, okay. So I guess we're done. Thank you very much, very interesting. So our next presenter is David Knight, one of the former co-chairs of this working group, showing us some of the recent research he's done on how resolvers treat different numbers of addresses.
Right. Thanks, Shane. Yeah, I'm Dave Knight. I work at Newstar Security Services as an architect on the Ultra DNS platform. And what I've got today is kind of a simple operational story, a workaround to confusing things in the registry side of the shop. So recently, and the first half of the year, I spent my time building a second edge platform for Ultra DNS, which launched a couple of months ago. We're now onboarding customers, and some of those customers have expressed concerns about how we make this available to them. A typical Ultra DNS customer has up to 6 name servers in a domain, and when they adopt our second edge platform, we want them to add 2 more. Now, a bunch of customers have said to us that, well, 8's a lot. There are some registries out there who won't let you have 8 name servers in a delegation. So I looked into how big of a problem this is. And it was surprisingly hard to find data specifically on what the constraints are in a delegation per TLD registry. Maybe I'm just not very good at Googling this stuff, or maybe it's just hard to look for. But after asking around a bit, finally, Michele Nalon from Black Knight was able to point me at a public list, which has metadata for all TLD extensions. And I also got a list from a registrar. It's a smaller list. It didn't have everything in it. And also the numbers didn't always line up. So I'm not sure who's accurate. I'd hope that the registrar is more. But I've merged the lists in favor of the lower numbers because that's what I was interested in chasing down. So in this little table here, I've bucketed those by the maximum size of the delegation NS set. Looks like the sweet spot, if these numbers are to be believed, the sweet spot is 10. Around half of them seem to allow 10 name servers. But down at the right-hand side there, it looks like around 1/3 of all TLD extensions don't allow as many as 8 name servers in a delegation. So how do we work around this? Well, the simple solution, and the one that people use right now, is to just use fewer name servers. And you know, a naive look at that is, oh, well, we do Anycast. Every one of our nodes is capable of answering for any address. Routing is probably going to take you to the closest node. This is fine. Why do we need lots of name servers? See, the way that we and others do our Anycast, in pursuit of a balance between performance and resilience, we don't flatly advertise all of our prefixes exactly the same from every node. We don't want that for any point in the topology that all of your queries will always go to the same place. Because if that node has some kind of problem that we can't quickly mitigate, then we've created a black hole. So the way that we solve for that is that every one of our nodes depreferences some of the prefixes as they advertise them, so that from any point in the topology, we try to guarantee that for the set of name servers for your domain, at least one of them is always going to go further away than it would have to. We try to bias that. So most of the queries will go to a node that is topologically closest to you, but some of them should always go elsewhere, so that if that node starts to black hole traffic, you have an authority server of last resort to get an answer. So from our perspective, we don't care about names. We care about IP addresses, and we want resolvers to exercise all of our different routing announcement strategies. So then that made me have the idea, well, can we just give, if we can't have lots of names, can we still get lots of addresses? Can we give a name server name more than one v4 and v6 address? So obviously multiple addresses is already not surprising, because since we deployed v6, it's been common to have a name resolved to 2 addresses. But could we do 4 or 10 or 20? How far could we take it, and where does it break? So the main questions that we have is, if we give a name server name lots of addresses, will a resolver use all of them? And do the resolvers treat those as sets belonging to a name? So if one of the addresses behind a name is broken or has very poor performance, will the resolver treat all of the group of addresses that belong to that one name in the same way? Oops. So have I gone too far? Yeah, sorry. So I came up with an experiment that we could do. I used my very narcissistic personal domain names to set that up, and gave 2 name servers a bunch of addresses which represent our 2 platforms. So in our Ultra 1 platform, we would have lots of addresses. In our new Ultra 2 platform, we have fewer. And so this is set up to kind of represent that. And so what I've done is set up a test name server in the lab. It's running NotDNS, and I configured it with all of those addresses, and have then a little bit of Python to send queries to a bunch of recursors. So I have set up on the bench next to my test name server a bind, a not, and an unbound, and those were just apt-get install, the most basic, didn't touch the configuration if I didn't have to, just be a recursor, and I tuned nothing. And then also I sent queries to Cloudflare, Google, OpenDNS, Quad9, and the UltraDNS Open Recursive. And the queries that I send are cache busting queries, and with some information in there so that I can easily identify the queries as I capture them on my authority server. And in each, as I walk through the list of IP addresses and break one of them at a time, and then send out 1,000 queries to each of the recursors, and then capture all of this. And what I want to then count is the number of queries which arrive at a broken address. Because what I want to know is, after it sends a query to a broken address, does it then use the next address, or is it going to jump to an address that belongs to a set of the other name server? And when a broken address starts to work again, how quickly does the recursor recover and start to send queries back to that address? Now, first, an apology for what is to come. I'm not very good at visualizing data. I should really do more homework on that. So there are a lot of tables of numbers. I'll try to explain things and make it not too painful. So these tables of numbers show counts of the initial query to a dead address. That's the thing that I'm interested in. And to read the table, the columns are the name server address where the query has landed, and the rows are each iteration where I've broken an address. And so what I want to see, what I expect to see, is a low number of queries arriving at a broken address, because I would expect that a recursor will quickly detect the brokenness and stop sending queries to it. What I want to then see is in the row beneath that the number quickly goes back up again as the recursor detects that the name server has become available again and starts using it. What I don't want to see is blocks of addresses associated with a particular name all not getting lots of queries because it would suggest that a recursor might be grouping them by name. And in order to fit all of the IP addresses into the table headers, I've shortened them. So .13 is the v4 version and ::13 is the v6 address. Now, I've done the list of recursors is in alphabetical order. So we're starting with bind, and it just so happens that bind has the weirdest behavior. So first of all, bind strongly prefers IPv6 if it's available. So I mean, looking at this, I've highlighted the part of the table that we're interested in. So the v4 parts don't matter. Bind, if v6 is available, bind doesn't send queries to v4. And then I've also highlighted the weird behavior. So in the first 4 rows here, where I break just the v4 addresses, nothing happens because bind doesn't use v4. When I get to v6, then things start to look weird and a bit frightening because it looked like, oh, one of the addresses in the set of addresses belonging to NS1 or U1NS is broken, and now it doesn't send any queries to any of the other addresses for that name server. But that's not quite what's happening. It looks like, and maybe this is perhaps my naive interpretation of what's happening, that when bind, it looks like bind holds a sorted list of the resolver addresses, and when it detects that the first one in the list is dead, it jumps straight to the end of the list and sends all the queries there. And then as we walk down the rows, you see this being borne out. It seems to hit the first address, send some queries, but as soon as it hits a dead one, jump to the end, jump to the end, jump to the end. No one else does this. All of the recursors seem to have a reason, well, all but one, but we'll come back to that, seem to have a reasonably recognizable pattern of behavior. Bind is by far the weirdest. It's also really quite slow at getting an answer when it's encountered a dead address. I think it was pretty consistently take 1600 milliseconds to successfully get an answer once it's been once it's timed out once. So moving on, the next in the list was not recursor, and it doesn't seem to have a strong IP version preference, and it is really fast to recover from a timeout of a dead address. It pretty consistently gets an answer when it hits a dead address in 40 milliseconds, which was very impressive. And also it doesn't seem to penalize dead addresses for very long. Then unbound is wonderfully normal. It's kind of in the middle of everything. It doesn't seem to have a significant IP version preference, and it doesn't significantly penalize broken addresses for long. And then I start moving into the big public open recursives. Cloudflare very strongly prefers IPv4. Bear in mind that what the counts are here is only the counts when it has encountered a broken address, not all of the counts. But certainly in those, never uses v6. It also does something that no one else does. A Cloudflare recursor sends a retransmit of the initial query using the same socket. So I see it coming from the same source port tuple about 200 milliseconds after the first query. No one else does that. I'm convinced I remember someone talk about this once a couple of years ago, but I can't remember where or when. But yeah, that's a thing that they do that nobody else does. But they also don't group anything, and they seem to recover from a broken address very quickly. Google also does a retry to the broken address once, not using the same socket, just a normal retry on a new socket. And it also doesn't seem to significantly penalize a broken address, neither does it have obvious IP version preference. OpenDNS very much prefers IPv6, but it will use IPv4 when it first encounters a broken IPv6 address. It doesn't significantly penalize broken addresses, it very quickly starts using them again. It is also very fast at recovering from a timeout in an address that doesn't work. So the not DNS results where I had a consistent 40 millisecond recovery from a timeout, but that was on a box that sat in the same LAN as the authority server. OpenDNS over the internet is able to get an answer within 100 milliseconds pretty consistently after encountering a timeout. Quad 9, slight IPv4 preference, and And it's not, you don't see it here, but looking into the captures, quad 9 is the one I mentioned earlier that doesn't have an obvious pattern of behavior. And I think the rumor is that quad 9 uses multiple implementations. It's like, yeah, I see that in the data. And then finally, UltraDNS. UltraDNS, no obvious IP version preference, and also doesn't significantly penalize broken addresses. So, does it work? Will resolvers use lots of addresses from a name? So aside from the address family biases that we saw in that data, yeah, they use all the addresses. And do they penalize all the addresses for a name if one of them is bad? Only by 9 seems to aggressively penalize anything. And I think that's doing something weird rather than something intentional. And so, yeah, really we see no evidence of a resolver penalizing groups of addresses for a name. Resolvers use the name server names to populate a list of addresses that they're going to use to then find authority data. And otherwise, name server names don't matter. So this seems to work. But then we have to think about glue. In my zone, I can give a name server name as many addresses as I want. But because these names are used in a delegation, I also have to often put those names into a parent zone. And exercising the parent zone means going through a registry. And, you know, if you remember the start of this conversation, exercising the registry is inconsistent, perplexing, confusing, and so let's look into this. EPP allows one or more address attributes on a host record. So more, great, I want more. I tried to add 12 addresses to a host object and just a handful of TLDs. CA allows you to have one address, not V4 and V6, just one, your choice. UK allows 2. You can have a dual stack name server and glue at UK. COM and org, however, allow, I didn't test for the maximum, but I was able to add all 12 of my V4 and V6 addresses in COM and org. So if we're going to have glue, we really kind of want it to be in COM and org. Probably other TLDs are available with such generosity of spirit around how many addresses you can have, but I haven't investigated that yet. So kind of to wrap things up, it's like this is what our optimum configuration would look like and how is the behavior of that. So I registered a few names, literally few names, manyips.com, org, CA, and UK, although I didn't include that in the test here. And so talking about optimum, in UltraDNS, we have 4 different route announcement strategies for our address space, which means that an ideal domain has 4 name servers, each with a V4 and a V6 address. In UltraDNS 2, we have 2 strategies. So we would like any UltraDNS 2 user to have 2 name servers. So we have a total then of 6 strategies, which means 6 V4, 6 V6. So we have 12 addresses that we want to get into a name. And I just care about getting these addresses into a resolver. It's clear that the names don't matter now. I just want to populate that list as quickly as I can. So I can put all 12 of these addresses, I'll put them on all the names. So then whichever name you look up first, or if you happen to get glue in your referral from a TLD, you've got every address that you're ever going to need in the first lookup. Which seems, you know, we really can't get a lot better than that. Now, the obvious logical conclusion to this as well is, well, maybe we only ever need to have one name server name, which I don't think is a good idea because TLD diversity is still important. If VeriSign has a bad day, I want Affiliates Donuts or whatever it's called now to be able to give me an answer. And so, you know, I still want to have at least COM and org name servers for a domain, potentially more. Now, looking at what this looks like on the internet, a signed referral isn't too big. You know, here's a lookup of the delegation at the GTLD servers for .com. It returns glue for the COM name server. This is signed with ECDSA, I forget exactly, algorithm 13. And this is the same size of a referral response that we get for some of our COM customers who don't do this stuff. And yeah, as I mentioned, when glue is present, the resolver is going to get every IP address it will ever need in the referral from the TLD. So, conclusions. I'm not proposing this as a new best practice. This is definitely something that is going to be useful for us, but not everyone has our set of constraints. It does seem to work though. And it doesn't seem to significantly change resolution behavior, though, as I've said, there's a slight optimization because one lookup gets the resolver every address that it will ever want to use. I think the customer should probably still try to use more name servers if they can. But if we were to adopt a practice where we just give all the name servers all the addresses, then they can kind of pick and choose whatever seems appropriate. Because TLD diversity is probably still useful, but it means that in the constrained environments, they can use two and things will work. The one worry that I have is that it's surprising. You know, what will tools do when they encounter names like this? Get host by name returns one address. Do they think that's enough? Are they properly testing and measuring you? So we can adapt our own tools, but you know, there are a lot of naive tests out there. I'm sure anyone who's done things in the TLD space has perhaps encountered tests that don't quite understand how modern DNS works. So our next steps are to take this out of the lab and start doing some trialing with some customers. And yeah, thank you. Any questions?
All right. So there appears to be some small amount of interest in this topic. So I'm actually going to close the mic because we don't have that much time for this, but Tail, you can join the queue. First I'll ask a question from the meeting system, which is, did you file a bug with ISC for Binds? Which version did you test?
I don't want to admit to just quite how late in the day I was putting this together. But since 11 o'clock last night, no, I haven't filed a bug with ISC.
All right, thank you. Please.
Hi, Chris, I'm in Ripon CC. Interesting talk, Dave, thanks. So for DNSMon and by default DomainMon, we sort of faithfully iterate through the NS records and just enumerate all the A's and quad A's. And we sort of made the decision not to really treat the NS records as, or the names as anything special. So we do just have a kind of a bundle of IP addresses. So this was actually useful that that's probably on the right track, and it's interesting to see how it works in the real world. So,
fantastic. That's exactly what I would expect. Thank you.
Ed Lewis of ICANN. I'll keep it short. Did you try giving the same IP address to two name servers?
No, not yet.
I would try that. Just try. I'd be interested to see what happens there, because this is something I thought for a long time, but I think that was one thing you should try.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I think that's a good question. Ed, I had a similar thought.
Rafi Akamai, great talk. So you said that you had kind of an experiment, or the last time you gave out every address to every name server.
Yeah.
So that means the domain has kind of one IP twice.
Yes.
Okay. So I mean, it works. There's a 1 in 12 chance in your case that the second kind of request from a resolver will also hit the same broken name server, but that's about it.
Yeah. But then, I mean, my imagining of how this actually works is that the set of addresses for an authority server is a union